SHENHE, the new 5-star cryo polearm user from Leeway, provides us with a pretty unique support playstyle that can heavily improve our damage for our cryo companions. Hi, my name is Avarice, and today we're going to be taking an in-depth look to SHENHE. I'll be showing you her materials needed, talents, constellations, weapons, artifacts, and team comps recommendations and to optimize your SHENHE to really shine. Some things about SHENHE really isn't explained that well, so I'm here to discuss that as well. And thank you for clicking on my guide, and in case you want to check out something specifically, I'm providing timestamps in the description below. Okay then, let's begin. Materials needed to get SHENHE to Ascension Phase 5. You're gonna need 1 Shivata Jade Silver, 9 fragments, and 6 chunks. You're also gonna need 108 Cheesing, which can be found in the mountaintops west of Leeway. There are other spots, but they can be mostly found in the mountains over there. You're also gonna need 18 Whopper Flower Nectar, 30 Shimmery Nectar, and 12 Energy Nectar to get SHENHE to Ascension Level 5, and these things can be found by killing any Whopper Flower of any kind. You're also going to need 26 Dragonheart's False Fin, and that can only be achieved by defeating the new bosses, which you have to complete a pretty long story quest on Inazuma for. So if you're new, good luck. To get her to Ascension 6, so you're going to need 6 gems and 20 more fins, 60 more Cheesing, and 24 more Energy Nectar. To get one of her talents to level 8, which is the talent level we're going to be working with, you're going to need 6 Whopper Flower Nectars, 22 Shimmery Nectars, and 10 Energy Nectars. You're also going to need Prosperity Books, which is available at Taishan Mansion every Monday, Thursday, and Sunday. You're going to need 3 Teachings, 21 Guides, and 10 Philosophies. You're also going to need 3 Hellfire Butterflies, which is obtained by defeating the weekly boss at the Tenshukaku domain. And this is the cost if you want to get 2 talents to level 8. And this is for 3 talents to level 8. SHENHE's basic attack, Dawnstar Piercer, consists of a moderate 5 damage attack combo. Here you can see all of her attacks play out in 4 angles. Once again in slow motion. And this is how her charge attack looks like. Her third attack also gives a little unique animation if her attack ends there. Her first hit deals 73.9% damage, second attack deals 68.8%, third deals 91.1%, fourth does a double 45% damage, and her final 5th attack deals 112.2% damage. Her charge attack does a low 187.2% damage, her plunge deals 109.3, low plunge does 218 damage, and her high plunge does 273 damage. SHENHE's elemental skill, Spring Spirit Summoning, has 2 different types of use, which is tap and hold. Tapping her skill will make SHENHE rush forward a small distance, which deals cryo damage to any enemy along its path. You can also go through most enemies with this attack, including Meta Trolls, but larger enemies like Ruin Guards will prevent you from going through them. Holding her skill, however, will deal AoE cryo damage while making her take a step back, and also make a small ice field on water that can be walked on for a short bit. Tapping her skill will take a moderate 10 seconds to cool down, while holding her skill will take 15 seconds to cool down. Activating her skill will also activate Icy Quills, which is the main reason you're going to be using her skill. Icy Quills will increase cryo damage based off SHENHE's total attack. Animal characters that can absorb elemental reactions like the bursts of Sucrose, Venti, and Kazuha will also count for the Icy Quills damage increase, as long as their bursts are infused with cryo. Cryo swirls will not count though. Tapping her skill gives 5 Icy Quills, while holding her skill gives 7. Icy Quills will be used up depending on how many enemies it hits, not the use of attack. As you can see here, I used SHENHE's skill, then Ayaka's skill. Even though this is a single attack, I used up 3 Icy Quills, not 1, because I hit 3 enemies. This is leaving me with 2 Icy Quills left since I only used the tap skill and it only gives me 5. So yeah, you're gonna run out of Icy Quills really quick. Although they can be used up pretty quickly, every character gets their own individual Icy Quills. Here you can see I used up SHENHE's hold skill, which gives me 7, but since Icy Quills are for everyone individually, I technically have 28, even though only 3 characters are able to use them. Note that after I use up Ayaka's Icy Quills and the effect is gone, switching to Rosaria will reveal that the effect is still on her and Rosaria herself will have 7 Icy Quills for herself. Shenhe's Elemental Burst, Divine Maiden's Deliverance, will create a small field where enemies who are within it will have a decreased physical and cryo resistance. A Spirit will also appear and inflict 2 strike attacks for a total of 6 times. This, however, comes at a high cost of 80 energy to charge up. Her burst can be paired up pretty well with her skill. Decreasing enemies' cryo resistance and increasing cryo damage can deal devastating damage to enemies. Although it can be a little bit trickier having smaller enemies in this field because the field is actually quite small, so you can actually accidentally kick them out unless you find a way to permafreeze them. Shenhe's first passive talent, Diphic Embrace, unlocked after ascending her to phase 1, will provide an additional 50% more cryo damage bonus if a character is active inside Shenhe's burst radius, useful to pump out even more damage. Her second passive talent, Spirit Communion Seal, unlocked after Ascension phase 4, will provide even more damage support for her teammates. If Shenhe uses her tap skill, skills and bursts will be increased by 15% for 10 seconds. This also includes characters that don't use cryo. If she holds her skill, all normal, charge, and plunge attacks will be increased by 15% for 15 seconds, characters that don't use cryo included. As you can see here, using Albedo, he barely does damage, hitting like as low as 100 and max 500. After holding Shenhe's skill, we see this be 200 damage more often and even hitting 600 as the max. Keep in mind, this doesn't mean if you hold her skill, you will also get the burst and skill damage increase that you get for tapping her skill. Her third passive talent, Precise Coming and Going, simply provides 20% more rewards when sent out on 20-hour expeditions in Niue. Talents can be costly, so investing into the wrong thing can be a pain and a waste of time. So I'll suggest which talents can be beneficial to level up first. So coming in first is her skill. Her skill is what boosts your damage the most, and you can use it a lot more often than her really costly burst. And for her second is her burst. While her burst can help do a lot more damage since it can decrease enemies' resistance, the super high cost and small field it creates makes it become a second priority. You should get it leveled eventually, but I wouldn't do it before her skill. And for her third is her basic attack. You can keep this at level 1 if you want. She doesn't do that much damage in the first place, and her other talents encourages you heavily to switch out to someone else anyway. Shenhe's first constellation, Clarity of Heart, allows her to use her skill 1 additional time. This means you can have an additional charge to use on her skill. But keep in mind, this won't stack her skill. Instead, it will refresh her Icy Quill. So you can't double tap her skill and have 10 Icy Quills, you will still have 5. Her second constellation, Centered Spirit, allows her burst to last 6 seconds longer, from 12 seconds to 18. While also providing a 15% additional crit damage to cryo users inside of Shenhe's burst radius. And yeah, it is as broken as it sounds. Many people agree this is where you can make any of your cryo characters stronger than ever before. Seclusion, Shenhe's third constellation, will increase her skills level by 3, making the max level be 15 as well. Insight, her fourth constellation, will help Shenhe act more of a sub DPS. I wouldn't say main DPS since she will still heavily rely on her teammates. So after Shenhe uses her skill, every time her teammates use up an Icy Quill, Shenhe will be able to stack Skyfrost Mantra, which will be used up when she uses her skill. For every Icy Quill used up, Shenhe will gain another Skyfrost Mantra stack, each stack providing 5% more damage and has a total up to 50 stacks, which lasts up to 60 seconds. I'm sorry I don't know any of these constellations, but I would have loved to show you what exactly does this look like, because it does seem very interesting to me personally. Divine Attainment, the 5th constellation, will level her burst up by 3 levels and make the max level be 15. And her final constellation, Mystical Abandon, will make her Icy Quill not be used up using normal or charged attacks, allowing many cryo users to do as much additional damage as they can as long as the skill is active, and not used up by using skills, bursts, or plunges. Just a personal thought out there, but I feel like this constellation can really bring out the true potential of her C4, since you can attack much more often than usual and get to that 50 stack under 60 seconds much more quicker. Shenhe's support comes from her total attack, so you want to have as much attack as you can if you're going to use her for cryo support. For the top 3 5-star weapons, first we have the Calamity Queller. the new polearm that came out at the same time as SHENHE, and is clearly meant for her. The second substat on this weapon is attack, so it would further increase her support capabilities. Coming in second is Engulfing Lightning, which has energy recharge as the second substat. SHENHE's energy cost is pretty high, so this weapon will help a lot with that. And since this weapon's damage increases with the user's total energy recharge, you can focus on her having like more recharge stats to help her get that burst much more often. And for the final 5-star recommendation I recommend is the Primordial Jade Wing Spear. The second substat is crit rate, and her attack will increase if she attacks enemies. This is a weapon I own myself, so I'm really sorry this is the only weapon I get to test out. I would love to use the other 2 weapons to try them out for testing, but that isn't the case. Anyways, for this test, we're gonna use him. Let's call him Ralph. I tried testing on Hilichurls, but they die too fast. So for simplicity, we're going to be using Ayaka's skill since it's her singular attack, and she's the top character I own that has the highest crit rate at 80%. So we can see here she does 7,793 damage alone with no buffs. We see this was the case for 5 times in a row. So then I tried her skill again 5 times, but this time with SHENHE's skill activated. This time she does 11,048 damage. Impressive since my current SHENHE isn't that built as of yet. So for the third test, I thought the Jade Spear effect went away after the current user got off the field, but that wasn't the case. If you don't know, after hitting an enemy 7 times with this spear, will give you the maximum damage available, and it is signaled by this green aura that appears for a moment. So after I got the effect, I quickly switched out, and what do you know? She does slightly more damage at 11,254. We see this multiple times, so I can confirm she doesn't lose the Jade Spear's effects when switching out. 4-star weapons can get a little trickier because there really isn't something that can truly bring out SHENHE's true potential a way that a 5-star weapon can. After testing out multiple spears I own and doing a little bit of research, I came up with these results. So for the first 4-star weapon is the Wavebreaker's Fin. Its second set being attack, so this can help out SHENHE with more of her support capabilities. But if you don't have this weapon, the Catch is a solid competitor for this weapon. For the second weapon is the Favonius Lance. This weapon can also do more damage than the prototype Star Glitter due to its higher base attack. And for the third 4-star weapon is the Lithic Spear. Not only this weapon can increase attack, it also increases it further depending on how many leeway characters you have on your team. So having a team of SHENHE, Ganyu, Xingqiu, and Chongyun in one team can really bring out the max potential of this weapon. You can really squeeze out as much damage as you can with this weapon as long as you can permafreeze them with Xingqiu and Chongyun. So now for artifacts. I will recommend the artifact sets first, then we will get into the substats afterwards. I'm going to be discussing 3 sets which I feel are the top 3 that will help SHENHE the most. So for the first artifact set, I recommend is a 2-piece Gladiators with a 2-piece Reminiscence. Both of these sets will provide an additional 18% attack buff each, and since SHENHE depends on total attack for support, this set will help out a lot with that. Coming in second is a 4-piece Noblesse Oblige, and since its 4-piece does provide 20% more attack bonus for everyone else in the party, I wouldn't recommend this too much because it's pretty hard to get like proper artifacts with good substats for like an entire set. And for the third set, I recommend is a 2-piece Emblem of Severed Fate and a 2-piece Gladiators or Reminiscence. SHENHE's energy cost is quite high, so the Emblem of 2-piece set will help out with that. And since it does provide 20% more recharge, that will help a lot with getting that burst much more often. And for the artifact stats themselves, I recommend for all 3 artifacts to stay as attack percentage for all 3 artifacts. This is because, like I mentioned before, SHENHE's support really depends on her teammates and she's pretty much built for support. So having like a Cryo Goblet will only really benefit her. And for the substats, first comes crit rate and crit damage. That will always be important no matter who it is. So let's just get that out of the way. For her third substat, I recommend is flat attack. If you guys didn't know, the substat cannot be the same as the main stat. So you can't have attack percent when the main stat is attack percent itself. And for her fourth substat, I recommend is energy recharge because like I said, her burst is pretty expensive and you want that burst up as soon as you can. So if you can't get that 2-piece energy recharge set, I really recommend to have energy recharge as a subset on something else because you really want that burst up. You can also go for an energy recharge stance, but I really wouldn't recommend it because SHENHE requires other cryo characters, so you can easily make any of your other cryo characters a battery for SHENHE herself. I'm not trying to throw shade at anyone, but I was never really a fan of when I was watching guides. Every time we got to the team composition section, they always recommended one team. It's just my personal opinion, I'm not a fan of that. So I created a mix and match list of 3 characters for each role, with SHENHE as a support. I'm not gonna go too much into main DPS SHENHE because that really doesn't work out that well. Trust me, I tried. So with SHENHE as support in mind, for main DPS we have Ganyu. I don't need to say much about her, we already know how she rolls. Then we have Ayaka, because since she can fuse her own sword with cryo, she can really take advantage of SHENHE's icicles pretty quickly. And for the third we have Jean. I recommend this if you have a physical build on Jean, which I personally have, with an Aquila Favonia and physical artifacts. Not only will this make her do good damage in the first place, but since SHENHE's burst can decrease physical res, Jean can really take advantage of this. Next, we're going to talk about sub DPSs. Keep in mind you can also use these characters as a main DPS as well. So for the first sub DPS we have Child. Once SHENHE uses her burst or any other cryo user, Child can really take advantage of this and cause a freeze reaction, making enemies immobile for a short bit. Next we have Chongyun. Chongyun can actually help you make a really weird team composition that makes anyone be able to use SHENHE's skill. Chongyun's skill actually infuses cryo to any other character's attacks, so anyone can use SHENHE's icicles as long as Chongyun activates his skill first. And for the third sub DPS we have Kaya. Kaya is pretty underrated and he's often overlooked as since he was a free character given to everyone, but if you give him time and actually build him, you'll find out he actually works pretty good with SHENHE's skills. Now for the batteries, these characters will dedicate themselves to help SHENHE get her burst much more quickly. Now for the first two, I'm going to list Rosaria and Kaya. I'm going to list them both at the same time because they're serving the same purpose, which is for them to use their skill and quickly switch out to give their elemental particles to SHENHE. Both of their cooldowns is actually 6 seconds, so you can actually pump out their elemental skills pretty quickly and help SHENHE to get her burst pretty quickly as well. And for the third battery, I'm going to say the Raiden Shogun. I know it's a little weird of a choice, but Raiden is actually a pretty good battery, but I wouldn't recommend to use Raiden's skill if you're about to release anyone else's burst with the intention of freezing everyone, because her electro attacks will mess you up. And for the last category, we have support. We're in 2022, where the support needs the support. So for the first one, I recommend is Kazuha. Since Kazuha's burst can actually infuse with cryo, he's able to use the icicles as well. And not to mention that his burst radius is pretty large as well, so you won't have that much trouble of missing an enemy or two. For the second, we have Xingqiu. We already know, the king of support. Although he won't be able to use SHENHE's icicles, he can carry his own with his burst, which lets him do Hydra attacks even though he's not on the field. So, if you have any other cryo character on your team, you can use Xingqiu's burst along with that cryo character to possibly do a permafreeze. And for the final one, we have Bennett. Bennett is also another popular support. If SHENHE's physical and cryo resistance decrease isn't enough, Bennett can provide more damage with his burst. So like I said, this is mostly a mix and match. You don't have to stick to someone as a main DPS if you don't want to. You can use a support as a main DPS if you're like that. This is just a few recommendations. Now this is just going to be 3 quick tips that can help you with SHENHE's combat abilities. Now for the first tip is how to get the maximum output for Icy Quills. Now we're going to be using a different crowd user's burst, so let's just use Rosaria for this example. Now instead of activating Rosaria's burst and just using SHENHE's skill in the middle of it, we can increase Icy Quills for Rosaria's burst just a little bit more. So when you approach an enemy, use SHENHE's tap skill first, then activate Rosaria's burst, and when SHENHE's skill is up, you can use her hold skill instead to further increase the Icy Quills outputs. And the second tip is for her burst. Her burst radius is quite small, so it's highly recommended to use a Hydra character like Child or Xingqiu to keep them frozen inside that burst. I recommend more Xingqiu, so if you have a cryo character you can use them up even more, because remember, enemies inside SHENHE's burst actually has a decreased cryo resistance. And for the third is remember that you have a hold skill. I'm just saying this because personally I kind of forget that she has a hold skill. I don't know what's up with me, I might just be dumb or something like that, but I find myself forgetting that she can actually hold her skill. I think SHENHE is a good addition to the game, though I do feel like her exclusivity to cryo characters can be a little weird and can limit your choices. I know she slightly helps physical characters too, but if you have SHENHE, you get the most out of cryo characters, not physical. And the little problem I have with not just her, but pretty much any character that provides a buff, is that there's no way to trace like if your buff is active or not. I wish there was like a little indication at the bottom at least, like when you eat like a food buff or something, because the visual effect that SHENHE's skill gives you is not a good indication. Like it's just there when it's active. It never really tells you if you used up some of your icy quills or if you're about to run out. I also feel that new players shouldn't roll for her. I mean, you can go ahead, but these new players will probably have her sitting in the back just watching for like the longest time. Cause like I said before, you need that one material from that Inazuma boss, which is super late into the game. Not to mention, she also depends very heavily on other cryo characters. And if you're starting out, you probably don't have that many characters built up, let alone have that many characters to play with in the first place. Ignoring that, however, I do feel like she's a good addition to the game, because we don't always need another DPS, especially since we got like 2 other characters currently that are extremely good DPSs, or 3 if you want to make Zhongli into a DPS. But how do you make Zhongli into a DPS? Like and subscribe to find out when I drop a guide on how to do so when his banner drops.